Very good morning, friends. I welcome you all to this TI Global Summit, and we are having a very fantastic panel coming up on early stage and startups, the safe terms and all things for. I think first time founders. I think this will be very interesting topic. We have panel coming from Australia, Singapore, and Israel, and from India. Very interesting. I just wanted to introduce the panel and then hand over to moderator Jyoti. We have Mr. Nitin Singhi from Sydney, and he's a MD Horizon Private Capital. And we have Sanjay Mehta from Mumbai, India, a founder partner for 100x VC. I mean, he has revolutionized, very early stage funding in India for last couple of years. And then we have Anat Sehgal from Israel. She is CEO Capital Nature, advancing early stage startups in sustainability and climate tech. And we have Ghanshyam Ahuja from Singapore. He is the co-founder and managing partner, Thinkuvate, an early stage VC firm. And we have Jitendra Ahlawat from Delhi, India, founder and Hedgie and Associates, assisting startups in corporates with their legal and compliance requirement. And we have Jyoti, from Sydney, Australia, who has been, need to conduct this session, co-founder at StatMe, a startup incubator and accelerator across Australia and India. I mean, a fantastic, team we have. And Jyoti, you can take over and, move on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Raghu. Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here. I'll just give a bit about the aims of this session and how we are going to go forward. So the aims really is, as Raghu mentioned, very early stage startups and to address challenges faced by these early stage startups and the founders with regards to funding. So we will explore the instruments and the terms used for funding, but at a very basic, so that the founders at this very early stage can really understand what we're talking about. And to start at the very beginning of the startup journey. Most startups, as we know, the world over, are created on very basic, frugal means. So we will start at the very beginning of such a journey. So as Raghu mentioned, we've got Nitin here today. Nitin is from Sydney. As Raghu mentioned, he's the MD of a private equity firm, and his background is in corporate law. Sanjay, as you know, I think is a very prolific career investor. I think about 130 startups or something he's invested in. And he's quite well known for the iSafe note, which is of great interest in this session. Now we have Anat. Anat is the CEO of Capital Nature. Very interestingly, they are investing in sustainability and clean tech solutions. And from what I see, Anat has made that about 5 million go to 5 billion, as I understand it, in about 7 years. So that's amazing. And I think a handful of startups really to IPO stage. So really looking forward to hearing those things. And then we have Ghanshyam, who's the co-founder of a VC firm in Singapore. His background is business and technology. And Jitendra is the founder of a corporate legal advisory firm in India. And of course, his background is company secretary and corporate law. So what I'm going to do now is allow each speaker to introduce themselves, which I'm sure they'll do a much better job than what I've just done. And once they've done that, we'll delve into the actual content. In terms of Q&A, a question and answer session, please go ahead and post your questions on the chat box. We will take up that towards the end of the session, where we are going to devote about 15 minutes to it. So if I could hand over to Nitin to introduce himself, and then following that, the rest of the speakers, that would be great. Go ahead, Nitin.
Thanks, Jyoti. Hi, my name's Nitin Singhi. I work in the capital markets and private equity here in Sydney with a focus on early and mid-stage companies. I've been practicing in Sydney for over 20 years and I'm a director of several companies, including an ASX listed company. My areas of expertise are in financial services, healthcare, technology, education, and energy. So quite broad. Recent transactions, which is very topical, is a true early stage startup in the wireless charging area, where we've just invested in that over the last 12 months. So that came from nothing. So that's a good case study for this session. I've done a management buyout of one of the largest swim school businesses in Sydney, and also recently raised funds for a solar PPA fund here in Sydney. I've got a background in corporate law and spent 10 years at top tier firms in Sydney and London in the 90s, and ran a $250 million fund for the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. So look forward to being on the panel.
Thanks, Nitin.
Sure,
Go ahead,
Jyoti.
Sanjay.
Should I go next?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This is Sanjay Mehta, founder and partner at 100x.vc. Prior to 100x.vc, I used to be an angel investor, done over now 150 odd investments in a personal capacity. We have a family office called Mehta Ventures family office arm, where we invest across the world. 100x.vc is an India-focused one at first check, early stage, and we created iSafe notes, India Simple Agreement for Future Equity, and to quickly close the transactions and work across. We have invested last 1 year 29 companies through 100x.vc, out of which 21 have gone to raise the next round of funding. In case if you're looking to raise the first round of funding seed fund, Indian startups, write to us at pitch@100x.vc. Look forward to the next session. Thanks.
Thanks, Sanjay. Anat, please go ahead.
Yeah, so hi, everybody. Very happy to be here. So yes, I'm the CEO of Capital Nature, which is an investment firm that started out as a technological incubator, basically seeding companies or projects with potentially to be groundbreaking technologies addressing global challenges in the sustainability area. So we did pinpoint several technologies that have become potentially major solutions for very profound problems that we are facing today in the area of climate tech and sustainability, which I'll be happy to talk about later. Before that, I was founder and CEO of Xenia Venture Capital, which also started off as a technological incubator in a model that is special to Israel and been applied in other places in the world as well. And in Xenia, we have invested in ICT technologies mainly, medical devices and pharma, and also have succeeded to grow several viable companies with real products that help people and humanity.
Thank you, Anat. Ghanshyam.
Hi everyone, this is Ghanshyam Ahuja, managing partner for Thinkuvate. The history for the name is if you divide 3 words in innovation, think, innovate, incubate. If you combine these 3 words, becomes Thinkuvate. That's how I coined this name. Years in corporate world. I spent most of my time in initially telecom, e-commerce, Fortune 500 tech companies like Cognizant, and Big 4 consulting companies. And last 8 years, I have been entrepreneur come investor, out of which 5 years running Thinkuvate. In Thinkuvate, we have seen almost 2,000 companies and invested just 10, I would say. We are very selective, I would say. But proud to say that one of the companies is already listed in Australia, in ASX, and one of the companies in US, and rest of the companies are in India and Singapore. And we keep looking for mostly tech disruption in B2B or B2B2C. And proud to say that, Jyoti, here we have helped the entrepreneurs and their initial investors before us in changing some terms of their investment in favor for investors and for the founders. So happy to be part of this panel.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing that. Thank you, Ghanshyam. Jitendra, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Jitendra Helawat from, I'm a company secretary and corporate lawyer, and I run a legal and compliance firm, HA& Associate in New Delhi. So we help startups to cater their compliance needs and the legal needs. We help them to, manage their compliance management, their funding rounds, their due diligence, and take care of all the compliance and legal need of the startups. We help, many of the good startups like CarCrew, Dogspur, Wealthy, India Accelerator, STEADME, Acna Medical, Jiplon, and Priority Vendor, Capital Quotient. So they are the few of them which are in Series A or Series B round now. So we help them in all their legal and compliance need in India. And recently we raised we help few of the startups in their seed rounds like Fineg, fintech, and medical. Fin Medical, so they are doing wonderful here. So we help them in all together legal and compliance requirement for the startups. So apart from that, I'm also a corporate lawyer, and I have a 7-year experience, and I'm also like one of the co-author in the company law premier book, which is like 7,000 pages book of the Companies Act. So, and also research member of member of the research committee of our institute, ICSI. So that's all from me. And let's get it started, Jyoti. Thank you.
Thank you, Jitendra. So I'll introduce myself. So I'm the co-founder for STADME. It's an incubator accelerator across Australia and India. Well, not just Australia and India, now we're getting interest from other countries too. So essentially we enable founders create and scale startups across countries by offering them a structured program to do so. An example would be, startup from Australia wanting to launch into India. We first and foremost create a co-founding team for them in India. And similarly, for the startups that want to launch from India into another country, Australia, for example, we create a co-founding team for them. These founding teams go through a 1-year program with us. The first 3 months is very intensive, though. As to my actual background, it's business and technology. So I've worked in Australia for over 20 years now in various industries, finance, education, marketing, etc. But I also worked in India, where I started out with Infosys in the very early stages, where it was a little office in Koramangala, Bangalore. So many people would have heard of that. My move into startups was pretty organic in that I was doing this in the corporate world. And so then I moved on to having my own startups. So I've had a few. So that's pretty much about me. Let me start the session and the content of the session. So as I mentioned before, we're going to start at the very beginning of a startup's journey. A startup that really starts with frugal means, so to speak, and which is very common in the startup world the world over. So let me paint a scenario. So we have 4 founders, and they've got a great idea. They go to an investor, pitch the idea, and they've got an yes to investment. So that's a scenario. So at this stage, they don't even have a company. All right. It's very, very basic. And this is actually not blue sky. This happens. This is a reality. So at the first question I'm going to say is, this startup that has got absolutely nothing, just pitched and got investment, at a minimum, what instruments would the startup need to accept this investment? Sorry, go ahead.
First of all, Jyoti, they need set up a company so that they have a legal entity for the startup. Second, they should go for, basic thing like in India, if you ask me, that they should go for the registration of the, startup registration with Startup India, and simultaneously opening their bank account and their GST registration and trademark. After that, they need to put some initial investment, which is, as minimum as can be 10,000 rupees, and they have to finalize their shareholding pattern among the co-founders, if there are co-founders. And if there is one, then he has to appoint one another shareholder for the namesake by giving 1 share, and he can nominate any person for that 1 member. And after that, after that, the startup can, get the investment into the company, and that can be, through, that will be depending on the size of the investment, and the instrument for the transaction will definitely is depending on the size of the investment. If the size is like in a few million, or let's say few $100,000, then it will definitely ask for the SHA or SSA. And if the transaction is very minimum, then that can be done through safe agreement, or convertible note, or share warrant, or we can say simply without any agreement they can invest into the company, and they can do the compliances as per the statutory requirement of the country. Yeah.
So Jitendra, that for me is giving me a whole lot of things that I need to do.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do all that. What is the simplest thing that what's the most minimum that I should be able to do as a startup founder? I just want one or two things that I need to do.
Should I go for that, Jyoti?
Yes, please.
Sure. So as a founder, first and foremost, if you're raising capital, get a term sheet from your investor wherever you are getting across. Once you have a term sheet, closing a document is secretarial work. What is your job as a founder is to get investor interested into your company. That is your prime importance. Rest of the things are secretarial work, which can be outsourced to somebody. Now, what you need to understand and what is of your importance is what document you would be signing across when you close an investment agreement. That is going to be very important, and that is why SAFE comes at play, which is simple agreement for future equity. And for Indian founders, we have got India Simple Agreement for Future Equity. It's a simple 4-5 page document, which is very, very founder friendly, not onerous on founders. And it gives you immediate access to the capital without going through much of the compliance. In a regular shareholder agreement, which is a price round, where you have to negotiate a valuation, arrive at a price, this is SAFE documents helps you close the transaction if there is an interest from an investor. You don't need to discuss valuation and keep it at a future round or a future right.
So in this scenario, the startup has got absolutely nothing, right? So they don't even have a company. So I suppose the first and foremost point they are stating here is that they will establish a company. Is that the let's get one thing off the box? Is that the absolute requirement that they have to establish a company?
Yes.
I would like to give practical advice because many of the entrepreneurs, in my experience, they come from the technology space and they are less knowledgeable about legal and business affairs. So my first advice to these entrepreneurs, unless they go to an incubator which has a good reputation, is to engage with a good lawyer who is knowledgeable in and very well entrenched in the high tech, not a real estate lawyer or a normal business lawyer, but at least here in Israel, you have several firms that have an expertise in working with startups at the very first stage, and they don't even take money at the beginning. So they can set up the company, they can educate the founders as to the ins and outs of all the intricacies of investment agreements, because it is a complex world and it's impossible to learn it, and the last thing that you would want to do is learn from your own mistakes. If I'm talking to entrepreneurs, so somebody that they can trust and that can really take them hand in hand through this process. I think that would be, if practical advice, this would be my best practical advice.
That's great, Anat. What would that lawyer actually do, though? What instrument would he set up for them?
So he, first of all, he would set a company, and there are various intricacies to that as to which jurisdiction to set it, what would be the future business. So he would be able to talk them about it and walk them through the points and considerations as to where to set the company, how they envision the company, what would be, because things that you do at the beginning, if you do them right, then you don't have to spend a lot of money and time to correct them. So it's much easier to do it that way. And then in terms of the investment agreement, well, it really depends on the investor. I think it's the investor who calls the shots in these cases. So some investors prefer to invest in early investment with a safe instrument because they don't want to determine the valuation of the company. But some investors are not like that. Professional investors or super angels, if you want, they want to determine the valuation of the company. And then the set of agreements is completely different. Then you have a full round with a share purchase agreement, an SPA, or sometimes it can go with a convertible loan agreement, which is a variation of the SAFE, or really better, the SAFE is a variation of the CLA. So I think this depends on the investor, and it's quite difficult to just hypothetically say go for this or go for that. I think we would give it. We would be giving not the best direction that we could give to founders that are listening to us, and then they would say, "Oh, I heard in the panel that you must do it in a safe." No, you don't necessarily must do it within a safe, but you do need somebody to go with you through the process and hand in hand and escort you through that in order to let you know the do's and don'ts and what really considerations you have to be having in front of your mind when you take these very initial steps that sometimes determine a lot in the future of the company.
Sure, I think Nitin had a point.
One of the first things that as an investor you also look for is what's the IP. So I think a company is definitely essential, but an IP assignment deed to something that makes sure that the company that you're going to invest in as an investor actually holds the intellectual property that is a subject of what's going on is incredibly important. And the other thing that they should think about, if you're a founder with the greatest idea in the world, is to think about before you disclose it to anyone, is this patentable? And if it is, then you wouldn't be disclosing it to people. You've got to think about making sure that whoever you disclose it to is under an NDA so that you don't have all the issues. So, if you've got a technology startup, which a lot of people do, software, not so much, but if it's in hardware or medical devices, and you've got something that you think is novel and patentable, then, one of the important things to do is to go and speak to a patent attorney and say, is this patentable? What do I need to do to get a patent and get that priority date? Because that's incredibly important too.
Thank you, Nitin.
Yeah,
sorry, Ghanshyam, go ahead.
To share with you my take on, as all of you know, Singapore is known for doing ease of business here, and practically what happened, our panelists already shared. Frankly speaking, if you ask me, my take is even if you don't register your company initially, it's fine as long as you have, like Sanjay mentioned, term sheets and some agreements, basic MOU or agreement you have with the investor. The reason, because the scenario what you gave seems like investor is actually believing in the founders and the idea. And the fact that they don't even have a company, that means within founders, if they have 2-3 more founders together, I can guarantee you even within them, they may not have agreed in writing something, some percentage. So that's the first step they should do. What is the overall agreement this investor will have? And you can have a futuristic goal saying that next 6 weeks, we are going to set up company XYZ Private Limited or whatever LLP structure, whichever structure. You can still have an agreement. And as it is, before you get the money, you need to have a company and bank account.
Thank you, Ghanshyam. So I think we have gone from a long list. So thank you, Jitender, for bringing out what's relevant in India at this point in time, which does make things very complex. So I've been across the 2 countries, and I see that it does make things very difficult for founders in India. I think at this, what we've just stated there is at the minimum they may, as Ghanshyam pointed out, may have an agreement between themselves to have a company in a few months' time, but the company is required. I suppose what we are saying here is that all the shareholder agreements and all these complex things, that is, it can be within the founders and within the investor, but at a very basic level, and not involving many, many.
You don't need shareholder agreements. You can start with
Okay.
safe notes. You can start with safe notes and graduate yourself as the business grows across. You graduate yourselves to the shareholder agreement. Whenever you have discovered valuations, and are ready to do a price round. At early stage, how do you decide a valuation? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So safe notes are the way to go about. And mind well, Jyoti, what happens in most of the cases is, let's say in 100x, when we get an interest saying that this is a company we would like to work across, we take off all the regulatory and the compliance load off from the founder, and our team takes over and ensures that the right things are done, compliance is done across, and the right agreements are being showcased. The founder has to learn across in terms of what are the clauses on which they are signing across. On the safe note, what are the rights they are offering across, in vis-a-vis to a shareholder agreement. So that is the basic learning or understanding a founder needs. Rest all are taken care by secretarial work, right? And there are enough and more service providers who will take over. And these are like not daily routine jobs which founders need to learn, right? They need to focus on their business, but they need to understand what they are signing on. The document, what they are signing on is more important as a learning.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So my next question, when forming a company, right? So we've established in our previous section that we may have this informal arrangement between us, and we need a company though to be formed at some stage, and we need the safe or some other thing, but the safe is the easy one. So when forming this company, we know that when a company is formed, every entity is given some equity and every entity is listed there. But how do you actually take care if you don't have a term sheet or if you don't have a safe, you just form the company, how do you take care of your unissued employee option pool? We do want employees to have some equity in the future, but we don't have the provision to put them on the incorporation.
Simple, just keep a phantom stock whenever there is a price round. See, at the early stage, you give them equity, the equity does not have any value. Unless an investor comes on the table, employee stock options are of no value, and employees more or less knows about it. So the simple way is saying that, okay, this is how the employee stock option will work across. This is the phantom stocks, and this is what we are planning to do as the things go across. And whenever you do a price round, that's where this the stock options ESOP pool would be created across.
Second, Jyoti, ESOP pool is always a virtual pool. It's not like you have to issue the share at once. It's just like a virtual pool. So whenever there are virtual, sideline, you are sidelining a specific part of the shares, like 5% to 10%, which is generally in the market ESOP. So it's a virtual pool. Whenever you are providing ESOP, so you can grant options. So at the time of exercising, then you are actually issuing the shares. But
I understand that. But in the incorporation, we have to specify, as he mentioned, say phantom pools, but we don't have the phantom entity there. So do we have another instrument that we actually specify these phantom shares in?
So in phantom stock, what is that? If phantom stock is just a virtual stock, in that you will never get the shares. You will get the cash payout in phantom stock. Whereas in ESOP, traditional ESOP pool, you will get the shares when you exercise the share. You will get the shares. But in phantom stock, you have the option, but you will get the direct cash payout from the company for those phantom stock. In phantom stock, you will never issue the shares. It's just options.
And so just to come back to my question, so I'm creating a company. I've put the people, entities, I've got 4 founders there. Each one is given 20%, and I want 10% for these future employees. What do I do? Is this in my incorporation or is it somewhere else?
No, it's not for the incorporation. It is the later stage. You can do that. Before investment, you can create a pool. So ESOP pool is always created before the funding round. So because investor don't want to dilute for the ESOP, so whenever investor is investing into the company, they will ask the company that create a ESOP pool as per discussion 5% or 10% or 12 or 15 as per their requirement. So they create a ESOP pool, and after that investor invest, and then the ESOP can be granted as per the policy of the company. To whom they are in they want to grant, or as per their caliber of the employees. Yeah.
So to sum it all up, sorry, go ahead. Someone wants to.
No, what I was saying is, again, I'm a big believer of having things to be written down. How to do it and how to execute it, as Sanjay also pointed one or two times, it's more about the secretarial job. So the important thing is, even if you have a founder, kind of a founding employee, whom you want to commit, say 2% or 5%, you can still tell them that you will be given at the appropriate time. That time can be defined. That's number one. Number two is, generally founders, they keep some percentage from their own pool. What I've seen in Singapore, 5 to 10%, as Jitendra also said. I can say these three founders put together have 10%, can be diluted from them based on the ESOP pool what they decide, and at the future stage they can divest it.
Right. Excellent. So I think we have summed up you're pretty much summed it up, that at the point of incorporation, we have the distribution of equity. There is no stock or entity of the employees mentioned at the time of incorporation, but it's a separate agreement that you can have with a future employee to say, this is the equity I'll give you at our next funding round or whenever we accept investment. All right, so that brings me to the next question. There's various views about this, the size of this employee option pool. Now, I haven't heard really of, the common ones I've heard of is 10% and 20% of the employee option pool. Now, what is your view on the size of this employee option pool? What I'm looking for specifics on what would you recommend startups?
So the way we work across with our founders at early stage is to ensure that they have this as an in principle agreement, nothing legally offered across at early stage, because all these founders and companies are yet to prove themselves. It is not that they have raised significant amount of money that the company is now valued and their shares will be valuable for employees. So we would like to assure them, saying that keep your employees within that 5 to 10% pool, and try to ensure that it is vested over time. So talk about it, but the allocation, we only do it across at a price round, and that is where SAFE comes at play. If the founder is able to raise money through iSafe, let's say 2 times, they've raised across up till, let's say, 5 crore rupees. Idea is they've not done this pool kind of stuff. So whenever the price round happens, at that point in time, the pool will be created and this 5 to 10%, whatever they have committed, will be allocated. So, and again, the vesting would continue across. So it's SAFE, differs the employee pool option also till the price round happens.
Right. Anyone want to add to that?
I think the 5 to 10% sort of band is pretty reasonable, but it's also just all about if you need the right employee. If you need the right employee in an organisation to make that organisation tick, then you've got to think about what is the return that employee needs to get them across and stuff like that. You've already got the founders, but if you need it like a head of sales, or if you need someone who's got a particular technology skill, then it's just about, you've got to look at the quantum of dollars rather than the percentage that they're going to make out of it once they get to that relevant round. I always work my way back from the quantum of dollars someone will make. No one get excited by a percentage of equity. It's about translating that into a sum of money. That's when you get people excited.
So one more thing, Jyoti, here. So it's not a fix that you can raise, 5 to 10%. Initially, you can start with 5%, and later on you can increase anytime you can increase. You can increase up to, if your company really require the ESOP pool, if you really require some employees who you want to give equity, you want to hire a good talent for, giving ESOP. So you can raise at any time with the help of, mutual understanding with the investor. So you can raise it after the investment round also, let's say 10%, 15%, 20%. So it's a mutual agreed between investor and the company, and they can raise it. There is no bar in raising the ESOP pool. It's a virtual pool. It can be raised anytime.
Right.
But for start, you can go, 5 to 10% is the initial, tradition in the market, startup market, which we go about. And later on, you can increase. There is no problem in that.
Right. Right. Yep, go ahead.
Jyoti, just want to share with you one recent experience I saw in one of the company. By virtue of being a high profile kind of a co-founder or an employee who was coming on board, this founder happened to give him 2% share, and actually he went to ACRA, what we call in Singapore, which is accounting regulatory body, or ROC in India. And within 6 months, employee, they had, misunderstanding and whatever, they could not work together. So it was a big task for them to move out that employee from that, because even though so that's the suggestion I would like to give to people, that don't get carried away just because you have a very good employee who is pressing you to give shares now. Rather, you can put a time period of 6 months to 18 months so that you avoid these kind of issues. Because moving back shares and going to capital tax issues and then recapitalization and all those becomes a big headache. So that's a recent exercise we could.
One thing good in India is like there is a minimum 1 year gap of between vesting and granting and vesting. That is good. Once you grant, though, even those share cannot vest. Minimum 1 year is required for that. Yeah, that's a good thing about Indian law itself. Yeah.
Right. Anat, do you want to add to that?
I don't have a lot to add to others. The percentages in Israel are the same. Just wanted to say that technically, again, it depends on the jurisdiction. In Israel, you really have to create an option plan and you have to deposit it within the tax authorities. But you can do all of that later. The most important is that you allocate and you plan to create this option pool, and you plan how much to allocate it as a percentage of the company. And yes, it is most likely increased over time as the company develops. So yes,
Right.
I agree with everything that was said here.
Cool. So,
but under Australian tax law, there is limitations on how large an employee tax pool can be, so that you get the CG, the capital gains tax treatment as opposed to the income tax treatment. So I think that's very important in each jurisdiction, having regard to the taxation regime.
Yeah. Right. So I guess this, as regards the size, you start with a smaller size, and then as you get invested in, you have a bigger size of the employee stock pool. And I think we have just said that we start at about 5% and potentially goes to about 20% or so. And the next question I have is these 4 founders is what should be, a lot of, again, there are varying views here. Where investors look at the equity distribution between founders. Some think that, should it be equal distribution? Should it be the most important person in the startup having the greatest equity? What is your take on what do you look at when you actually invest in such startup? What's your view?
Typically at 100x, we are a first check writer. So when we see across founders, we leave it to them in terms of how the equity distribution they would like to have across. For us, we would like to see across a team rather than a solo founder. So we would always like to ensure that if it's a single founder, how that single founder can build a team and get more people on board. Startup journey is very tough, so we would like to back a team rather than a single founder. And between the founders, we ensure there is a founder agreement. So in case of any challenges, the equity is again given back at par to the founder who is continuing. So we just want to have that founder agreement done across. So in case if any founder leaves the company for whatever reasons, the founder, that equity is returned back to the founder which is continuing with the idea at par.
Right. So do you have any recommended distribution though between founders? Or
we don't recommend that. We leave it to the founders because it is best, because there would be so many combinations. Somebody would have invested money. Some founder would not have invested capital. Only time would be there, depending upon whose idea was it. So we leave it to founders, and they are smart enough. And I believe it is a job of founders to figure out rather than investor to do this. Once we have invested, if any changes happens, that is where it is a material impact for investors. And that is where we'll get into discussions with founders to ensure that the equity is available with the founder who is continuing to build the company.
Mhm. Anyone else wants to?
So, Jyoti,
Yes.
might take some suggestions. Sorry, Anat. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to comment that it's, I look at things in a functional way. So I tend not to interfere if a group of investors comes to us and they have a specific allocation, but it did happen in the past that I did interfere, and that happened in cases where I saw imbalance inside the team, and I saw that there was not, there wasn't a congruency between the functionality and the future function of each and every one of the founders. So just for example, I've had a case where I had 3 founders coming in, but 2 of them did not intend to work in the company. And there was one, the scientist, who did intend, who was to be the CTO of the company. And I don't remember, I think the distribution between them was equal. And then I interfered. Well, I didn't interfere. I just say that in order for us to invest, I would like to see a different allocation between the founders, an allocation that is in alignment with the future work that the founders are going to do in the company. Because and this is because one of our roles as investors is to avoid problems, or to foresee the problems and to avoid them in advance, rather than enter into a situation where there is already a problem and a conflict, and then it affects the company and its and its activity and its way to and its ability to function at a later point in time. So in that case, in that specific case, we interfered, and we actually caused the other founders to allocate to the founder that was going to work in the company, to allocate more shares to him. So what we tend to do is to look at it in a functional way and to create an alignment with minimum interference.
Thank you. Ghanshyam, please go ahead.
So, Jyoti, what I was about to say, there's no thumb rule. There's no thumb rule what percentage should work, number one. Number two, at ThinkUvate, and I personally also believer of equal distribution. Generally, we have seen problems within 2 years' time if you have equal, because you're bound to feel that one person is doing more than other, and very difficult to justify that always. And third thing is, it's a function of sometime money plus sweat, money plus domain plus idea plus sweat, depends on these combination. If they can think in those lines, they can come with a proper percentage. And also the last point is, we also personally, we don't believe in single founder. Generally, we have avoided companies with single founder. We have seen issues in the future. So generally, we prefer, if one founder is there, then at least good equity is given to some employees, key employees in near future.
Yeah. Yeah. Another concept that I've raised is that that we set aside a small pool of equity between the founders, which actually reflects their work effort. Usually in these early stage companies, everyone's working for sweat, right? There's no cash flowing around. So therefore, if one founder is putting in, twice the number of hours as everyone else, then there should be a small pool for them to sort of get access to. So that is something that's been worked before.
Yeah.
Jyoti, I think we should discuss on the safe notes, because I think
Sounds
that
fine.
question we need to pick it up.
Yes, so which was what I was coming to in a second. I think there might be a hard stop on us though. Not quite sure, but let's just quickly talk about it. I suppose one of the things that is very popular is the safe note. This was formulated by Y Combinator and used, and we have spoken about it already. What I'd like to talk about is really your experience in, the good and bad points about this instrument in your jurisdiction. So Sanjay, if you want to go ahead first.
Sure. So the way, the Indian laws work across, and we have safe note. The advantage of safe note is basically one, it is not onerous on startup founders. It's a very founder friendly document. So a couple of points, like for example, in a safe note, if you raise money through safe note, you don't have to give a board seat to any investors. There are no affirmative rights which you have to give across. There is no exit rights like drag along, tag along. All those rights are not there. It's a simple 4-page, 5-page document. Typically in a shareholder agreement, which is an alternative to safe note, which most of the investors would prefer, because that gives a rights and so much power to investor to control founders, while safe notes are with it's just gives a right to future equity whenever the company raises a future round. So there are it's a very simple document. But the main advantage which I see across for Indian founders is when you are raising a round in a shareholder agreement, all the investors have to sign one single document, one single shareholder agreement. Whereas in the safe note, it is one-on-one between the investor and the founder. So, for example, you as an investor and founder have agreed to terms. You can do one-on-one document, get the money into the bank, start using it, kind of stuff. So closures are very quick in safe notes. It's very simple to use. The documents, you can do it over the counter and close it across. So we at 100x, to simplify the funding, we believe shareholder agreements are very, very complex at early stage and should be left out when the companies are able to scale and raise a larger round. So at initial stage, we push in iSafe. It's an open source document. Anybody can visit www.100x.vc and download this document. You don't need to pay any legal fees. Just sign it. It's a templated agreement, and it works for Indian laws.
Right. Oh, that's excellent. I did go to your site. I couldn't find the document though in terms
It's
of
there in the 100x.vc/iSafe, and all the documents are there. You can download it.
Sounds good. Sounds
So,
good.
adding with Sanjay, I would say, Jyoti. Number one, it's totally depending on the size of the investment. If one investor is investing a huge amount of size, he will definitely go for the SHA rather than IC. Number one. Second, but if the early stage startup is there and they are raising a family and friends round, or some early stage investor, and the size of the investment is low, and they are raising it in a different time. It's not like so for SHA you have to have all investor at one go. So you have to identify, let's say, 5 investor, 6 investor, then you can enter into SHA. But in iSafe, it's better that you can enter into one. You can enter into iSafe agreement with one investor. Then after 1 month you can find another investor. Then you can enter into same terms and condition with that investor. But the ultimate thing is that in Indian law itself provide certain things. Even if you not enter into an agreement, even if you are mutually understand, then if you are doing the proper compliances as per Indian Act, then you can raise the round. It's not mandatory to have, as per the statutory requirement, it's not mandatory to have any agreement between the founder and the investor. But if the investors are agreed to invest on certain condition, then that can be done without the agreement, and then they can invest into the company, and investor can then the company can compile those terms and conditions into the shareholder resolution and board resolution and then AOA of the company, and then they can issue the security to them. So that can also be taken care if the investor is ready to do that.
Oh, okay. So hang on a second. So Jitendra, what you're saying there is when incorporating the company, this AOA and MOA, which is part of your incorporation anyway, if you take care of your investor details there.
Not that time, Jyoti. Even after the incorporation, when the investor is investing, and after that, you can amend the AOA.
Okay, all right.
Whenever there is a shareholder agreement, unless or until you are not amending the AOA, that is not having valid effect into the, as per Indian law, that SHA or SSA. So you have to amend the AOA, then only to give the 100% foolproof, viability to that SHA or SSA.
Right. So I suppose that SHA and involve a lot of legal fees, which is what we don't
Yes.
want the startups to have. And if there is an iSafe document, then it makes things easy for everyone.
Yes.
And it also is less fees. So
Yes.
that is, we cannot get past that. So that's a better solution, I would say.
Jyoti,
Yes.
we have 10 minutes to finish this session.
Excellent. Thank you, Raghu, for alerting us. So let's move on to the questions. So please, Raghu, go ahead and.
You say, and one question which came up, what are those, 4 or 5 key terms the investor should be worried when he is doing a very, very initial round, either angel or a seed round? What are those 4 or 5, conditions or covenants you should be concerned? How to deal with them?
So investors should be very, very concerned about, first, information rights. They should get an update regularly from founders. Second, they should be concerned about the shareholders who are going to come in the cap table after them. So there needs to be a sort of a consent right, whereby if they are able to understand and explore across, saying that there is a which kind of shareholders are going to be investing into the company. And lastly, the rights which matter the most for most of the investor will be exit rights. If exit rights are there, so these are the couple of rights. I mean, you can keep on increasing across to get more and more control onto the company, but it's I would say across it is more driven across by founders' intention and founders fairness to deliver what has been promised across. Agreements does come at play, but only when things are going up north, which means there are more and more investors and the valuations is going up, more investors are coming across. Uh, Most of the things, when things are going bad and you are trying to salvage, typically investors will write off those investments.
So one to add, Sanjay, one more, right, the anti-dilution right is investor is very keen to do that because anti-dilution at what price the investor investing, he don't want to get the another investor to invest into the company below that price. So anti-dilution is the basic right that every investor is also very keen to get. Yeah, Ghanshyam.
No, Raghu, was it towards founder? I think you mentioned what are the terms founder should be aware of, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. What he should give, what he should not give.
Yeah, actually, I thought so. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. So I think one of the few of the things founders, which I am proud, Jyoti, to share with you, we did help founders to change some of the terms which they could have really failed in future. Is like giving a coupon with no limit. That every year they'll keep giving some coupon percentage. Number one. Number two, they also had some percentage instead of number of shares. That I'll keep giving you 8, no matter what my valuation round becomes. I'll keep giving you 8%. Some of these terms will be very dense without realizing that they are giving a percentage commitment, which actually means more number of shares if the valuation is more. And the third is, the limiting themselves to how much they can give it to employees in future. Those are some of the unheard terms. Sometimes, I would say, unfortunately, I'm also from the investor community. Some of the greedy investors, not so good investors, they try to do these kind of things. So we should be aware of as founders.
Anat
We have
wants to
seen
go
that.
ahead.
Yes, I would like to add that in those early stages, we as investors can request certain rights and certain provisions, and sometimes we want to go on the board. And for example, as ourselves, we are pretty much involved investors, so we request certain provisions on the board or certain decisions that need our consent in order to pass, such as the appointment of senior management and the adoption of the budget and the work plan of the company. But I want to say that despite all of that, and these are provisions, it's like porcupines that, that they want to interact, but they're afraid of each other. So in this complex relationship between founders and investors, and I have been on both sides myself, I think that the best and the best advice that I could give people is to really work with people with whom you feel that there is good chemistry and a good personal connection, and really spend time with the investor and vice versa, the investor with the founders, and to get to know each other. Because at the end of the day, if we reach a situation where decisions in the boardroom or in the shareholders, yet worse, in the shareholders assembly, with regards to the future of the company are determined by voting and by exercising of rights, we are in a very bad situation. And I must say that when we reach these kinds of situations, most of the times they are irreparable. So I think that the best advice I can give people here is, yes, we need to take care of the provisions, and yes, we need to create the right legal infrastructure in the company. But in order to really create a successful company, which this is what we are all after, we need to see that the additional layers that are not in the legal terms are there. And this is basically good relationship, good working relationship between founders and investors, which can also go sour over the years. But at least if we start from that point, there is a better chance that we will be able to maintain it.
Excellent. So not what is on paper, but what is not on paper really matters.
Exactly.
There is one more question, addressed to Mr. Mehta. What is the ideal discount rate that a founder should provide the investor for a safe note?
Typically ranges around 20% is to the next round is what the discount rates work across. In Mindwell, there are safe notes without discount, no cap also there. And all the versions of safe note are available on 100x website. You can download and check that out.
Go ahead.
I mean, the other very general question. In India, the word startup is misunderstood. Are MSMEs considered a startup by investors?
No, startup means it's going to be an accelerated growth. The startup purpose is to disrupt the incumbents, the existing players by delivering much better, faster way of doing things. So MSME is a great business. It's a bootstrap which grows, organically. Startup is where it requires across growth capital for, rapid, accelerated exponential growth.
There's one more question. What is the minimum maximum percentage of dilution which can happen in the very early stage round? Is there a ballpark or a thumb rule?
In India, typical round raised are between 9 crore to 12 crore kind of stuff at early stage. If you are raising 1 crore to 2 crore, if you are raising across anywhere around, let's say 3 crore to 5 crore kind of stuff, a dilution of 25 to 30% would happen across.
So my take is generally at early stage, Raghu, we prefer not more than 5 to 15% is ideal max we recommend. Because after that, it becomes difficult for founders to maintain their majority if they go to Series A and B.
Agreed.
Yeah, right.
I mean, those are the questions we have, and I think we are also done with the time.
I think I saw one more question there. What's a minimum? Yeah.
Pardon?
No, I saw there was some question on what's a minimum investment a startup need. Depends on, again, different countries. In Singapore, you can actually start a company with $1.
Same in India. Same in India. So now you can
Yeah.
start with like 10 rupees
Yeah.
or 2 rupees. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, we'll address that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Jyoti, I think we are
Sounds
done
good.
with the take. Maybe
Excellent.
to conclude and move on.
Sounds fine. Thank you all. I can't actually see all the participants, but I'm assuming they are there. So thank you for listening to us. Thank you to all the speakers for making the time, not just today, but we've been working for a while now. Raghu, thank you for your coordination. It's been excellent in terms of preparing and organizing the logistics around this session. And thank you all. So that's it from me. So Raghu, if you want to take it forward.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.